Good morning. I will call the Cook County Board of Commissioners regular meeting to order on this day of Tuesday, March 11th at 8:30 a.m. To start our meeting, we do the pledge. Please rise as you are able.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any adjustments to the agenda? Commissioner Gamble?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to note something that appeared in the NACO National Association of Counties newsletter, County News, and it might be best if it followed public comment period, if that makes any sense.
That would.
Pardon?
That would. How would you make some comments on that? I was going to make comments on NACO myself, too.
Well, that's
end.
fine. I just
Okay.
felt that the nature of the comments probably would be at best following public comment, but you may put it where you'd like, but.
We can put it after public comments, so.
Yeah, it's related to public comment, so. Thank you.
Okay, any other adjustments? I'll hear a motion to approve.
So moved.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. At this time, we do have public comment period. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to come forth? Please sign in and state your name, address, and I will give you 5 minutes for your presentation.
Madam Chair, council members, thank you for having me. Today I'm sitting here representing the Great Expectations Foundation. We're the owners of the Great Expectations School. We have been talking with the county officials and commissioners and department heads for some time. We, as you may recall, recently added on to the school. We have a very nice addition, and it's been a fantastic space for our kids over there. The decision was made early on to allow for future expansion in one build, and we built an upper story. That's not needed at this time, and of course with construction, and we hit the market right when things were sailing upwards, so we got some debt that we need to somehow figure out how to cover. One of the ways is to lease that space, which we have. It's about 3,600 square feet of leasable space, not including bathrooms and hallways and things like that. So it's a very nice space for those that have seen it. I'm sure you agree. We have an elevator. It's airy. It's light. It's pretty private. You'd think being in a school would be noisy, but it's very well insulated above and below and walls, and we think it would be a great space for anybody leasing. So, our hope was that we would have continuing conversations with the county as you look at your needs. I understand late here in the game that you've already moved along pretty far on remodeling the basement here. But I just wanted to make one final pitch and plea that instead of spending capital, you could lease that space. It's a community asset. We serve the whole community. It's a draw. Good schools are a draw for any employers and any people that work here. Good people need good schools, and I think GES really adds to that. So I know it's late in the game. There's an elevator. I don't know if I mentioned that. So we could build that out at about the same time frame as you're looking at for the work in this building. So very late in the game, but if you had another month to deliberate, I'd be very happy to sit down with the building facilities committees and negotiate whatever lease would work for either party. But failing that, hope this being out in the public forum, there might be somebody else out there looking for space. But anyway, appreciate a few minutes of your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good.
Anyone else to come forward with public comment? Then I'll ask the board members, have any of you received any communication that you would like to have read? Commissioner
Madam Chair.
Sullivan?
I have some comments that come from Don Davison of 583 South Shore Drive. You authorized policies that made our homes unaffordable. You think that vacation rentals don't affect home prices. I recently asked an out-of-county appraiser to evaluate our home value both as a residence and a vacation rental. The result? As a homestead, the value is $529,000. As a vacation rental, about $680,000. But Cook County values our house as if it were a vacation rental. You need to stop this overvaluation of property in your district. Friends of ours have moved because they couldn't afford county taxes, and you don't seem to care. You're making it impossible for people to live here. And I have another comment. We are the laughing stock in Minnesota, a county our size with 3 full-time attorneys. You need to do an actual study. We don't need 3 full-time attorneys on staff. As I said before, you are the suckers. There's no way our small county needs 3 full-time attorneys. You've been taken a ride by lazy employees. An actual study will show that there is not any need for so many, but I guess you don't care. You just cave to demands. And let's see. This last one, you and I disagree about taxes. You seem to think that everyone living here wants their taxes raised. Guess what? We don't. You seem bent on bankrupting your constituency. I hope you will discuss this at an open meeting soon. We can't afford your vision of having people taxed out of their homes.
Thank you. Anyone else with something to be read? No? Okay, then Commissioner Gamble, you'd like to have some comments on NACO?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate that. Yeah, this came in the March 3rd issue for the public. It's the Association of Minnesota Counties, or Association of Counties, which is a national association. There's also the State Association, and these are resources for us as commissioners, and they put out this publication, which is County News. And fellow commissioners might have read some of these articles. I noted one on the back in a column that's called Now I Know. It is, the title of it is To Remember Why I'm There. And it's written by David Copeland, who is a county commissioner in Tipton County in Tennessee. And he says what I think is relevant. It says, when I took office, I started focusing on citizen engagement. It wasn't about me, it was about helping people find a voice to express their opinions and needs and ideas about how county government could best work for them. I thought that was the kind of change I could bring after taking a look at what others did and what I felt like our residents need and want. So whenever we take on county business, I want to make sure our residents can understand it and find out more. If that's the difference I can make while I'm in office, I feel like I did what I set out to accomplish. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the consent agenda items, we have claims and we have minutes, board meeting minutes from February 25th, Grand Marais Art Festival special road permit, Fox Bikepacking race special road use permit, Grant and Aid ski trail permit renewal, resignation of Scott Benolken, and retirement of Nanette Silence. Does anybody need to pull anything?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. I would just like to comment about Nanette, the work that she's done over the last 14 years. I really appreciate your work, Nanette, and good luck in your next phase of your future here, in Cook County, that is, as a retirement person. So we're going to kind of go around with different things at our meeting because we have a 10 a.m. public hearing. So let's move on to probably the next item we could talk about would be the maintenance for the courthouse basement.
Thank you.
Good morning.
So today I'd just like to, we brought the bids and all the items for the basement remodel so we could move forward with moving some public health and human services and HR and freeing up some space upstairs.
We've looked them over the period of time, and seems to me that I think as long as we can use the space that we already have here in the courthouse, we can move forward with discussing that. Any comments or questions that you'd like to give to Brooke or Commissioner Hawaii?
Brooke, could you, for the listening public, explain what the total project is not to exceed and just some of the big items that will be addressed? A lot of them were in the capital improvement plan, I understand that.
Yep.
Just for those that are listening, and make certain you speak into the microphone. I'm still getting complaints. I'm still getting complaints that they can't hear us in the outer world.
Yeah, so I'll just go down through the spreadsheet. So the Gardner Builders bid for $96,000. That's for demo, sheetrock, paint. We're gonna just peel up the VCT tile and they'll polish the floors. So it'll handle pretty much start to finish with that aspect of the construction. The kettle for the EVR for 56, that will address, that's basically a commercial model of a residential style air exchanger. So we sized it to do the entire basement, so we'll be bringing fresh air and then exhaust out of all the spaces and storage spaces in the basement. So just, it's kind of musty and stale down there right now. And it's expensive because it will have electric reheats for in the wintertime when we're bringing 20 below air in. We'll need to reheat that before we start pumping it into spaces. And then the other kettle bid is the plumbing. So with putting the lactation room and the storage room across the hall, we will be sawing in through the floor and bringing plumbing in underground and then attach to the main that runs down that center hallway. And it'll also address heat in the offices with additional fin tube heating source as well. Also the demo and getting rid of the old water in the old break room. Nordic Electric, that's pretty self-explanatory. They'll wire the new air exchanger, all the lighting outlets. They're gonna pull some Cat 6, some low voltage for MCIS and set up a switch. So we'll get everything set up so everybody will have internet down there and phone lines and everything. Braun Intertech, we needed to test the VCT tile to make sure there wasn't any asbestos in it. So that was just a testing cost. Network equipment, again, that just kind of goes along with MCIS for switches and things like that to get everything up and running. And then the office furniture, cubicles and desks and things like that. I did put in the 7% contingency, which is a little higher than normal. And I did that just because when we're sawing into the base, into the concrete, digging in the floor, you never know what we're gonna run into. Hopefully we don't have any issues, but I just wanted to make sure we were covered in case we did run into anything. So that brings us to a grand total of $295,300 $353.17.
Let's continue.
So will there be a reconfiguration of the spaces, like a remodeling and adding walls in the break room, and where does all of this material that's been in storage? I mean, is there a lot of reconstruction or just a few walls here and there?
Well, there's a few walls here and there. So we'll be basically, one storage room will be completely eliminated. And then the new doors will go into where the cubicles are, the existing break room. So there'll be a wall dividing that. And then across the hall, we will be adding 2 walls in there. So a very small storage room will get enlarged. And that's the one that backs up to the bathroom so we can have our water and our plumbing issues. And then behind that, another wall will be built to build the lactation room, which you'll enter the lactation room off of the new break room.
One more question.
Continue.
And so will there be like a sketch, a blueprint for the public to see at some point along the way, not like necessarily now, but just, there are many people,
Yeah.
some people even say there's a basement.
Yep.
And then other people will say, what's down there?
Yep.
So I think that would be beneficial.
Attached to this agenda online is all the blueprints and all the bids are located right there. So they're all out there.
Commissioner Gamble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your work on this, and of course, as part of the Building and Facilities Board, I've had an opportunity to sort of catch up to speed on what's going on. It might be helpful, it's a good point that understanding, the costs involved and the nature of the configuration, it might be best to step back and take a broader look at it from the standpoint of what our identified needs were and what we looked at and what we ended up concluding as to the best approach, both from the standpoint of meeting the need and addressing the financial aspects of it, how we could manage it more fiscally responsible.
Yeah, well, we started off, there was an ask for me for the need for space. So we started off looking, there was some vacant office space in the west end, and there was some vacant office space at the hub, and then we did look at GES. GES, the west end and the hub, they were nice spaces, but just wouldn't have worked for us with the privacy issues and the size of them. GES was a very nice space and would have worked for us, but I think it's a wiser use of our funds to put it into our basement where we'll use this infrastructure forever instead of renting a space.
Thank you.
We did start this back in 2023 when James was helping us decide how we can use outer space in other areas, not outer space, maybe someday, how we can use other spaces. And so I think this is the conclusion that we've come to, and maybe Administrator Roman would have some ideas on that?
Sure, yeah, I think kind of just to put a little more detail into it, when we really started looking at this project and other options in full, it was within the context of this year's budget being approved, which put us in a position where there were 4 positions in PHHS that didn't have dedicated office space and 2 positions in HR that didn't have dedicated office space. So it was within that context we started to look at how can we address those immediate space needs. It's not to replace or supplant our larger master plan that address all of the larger space needs where we have, 3 to 4 people in offices that were designed for 1 or 2. It was we have staff positions that have been approved that actually don't have a place to work here at the county. And how do we address that in the short term? And so that's why, in that context of sort of a short-term solution, renting seemed like a good option to really explore and consider. And so we started looking at the places Brooke mentioned. There was commercial property available on the west end. PHHS Director Allison McIntyre and Brooke went out and looked at that. We met with then Chair Sullivan, and the same group of us met at the hub and talked about reconfiguring their space and what that would work, as well as touring GES with members from our building committee. Commissioner Mills was representing the board there in that meeting. And we took all of that information as well as the proposal that we have now for the remodel of the basement, and we brought that to the Budget and Facilities Advisory Committee as well, citizen representation there, as well as our internal building committee with stakeholders for county facilities. And very much like Brooke said, because of the existing deferred maintenance that we need to get done within the basement area, the mold remediation that still needs to take place within that same area, as well as the ability that this project gives us to get a lactation room, which is another requirement we need to have within this building, and just the benefit of addressing all of those and in a long-term solution, a reinvestment in existing county infrastructure. It's for all of those reasons that both committees and the staff's recommendation is that we, instead of renting, move forward with reinvesting in our existing building to both address the issues that I mentioned as well as provide that short-term space need that we need.
I think we've been lucky that we've been able to have a strategic plan that started way back 3 years ago about. And this is a result of strategic planning. And so I guess at this point, it seems that that is the best solution. We've just about used up all the space available in the courthouse, unless there's a niche somewhere else that we might be able to use. But I think it's a wise move for the staff, and they will be close to each other in case they need to go back and forth rather than go out of the courthouse over to another building and use that facility. But for now, this has been a long process of decision-making, so. Commissioner White.
And Administrator Watkins, could you explain, because people have continued to ask, well, what about the Stan Bausch building? That just seems like a really good space. We could buy it for $1 million something, and then we could just renovate it. Why didn't we do that? And you can best explain this part.
Well, I was in a different role when we looked at that building and made that decision, so my view into it was somewhat limited, but I would say part of it was, similar to this, in that the county has a pretty extensive list of deferred maintenance that we need to take on for ourselves. And there was some conversation about, the remodeling and just not wanting to add to that list of deferred maintenance that would need to be addressed. One in particular, when we were talking about moving PHHS over to that location, we talked about whether or not we would then extend the county's network to them and having that redundant fiber network that they benefit from having here in this building, and that's obviously a consideration here as well. And so, a couple of years ago, you might remember the county had a large fiber cut, and we had staff from North Shore Credit Union and other places come into our buildings to do their end of the day processing because we were the only facilities that had connectivity. And so, retaining that type of redundancy and so many other systems that we have within this building, duress systems and access control and all the other systems that we've invested in this building, provide a lot of value that if you were going to push to a new building, there'd be a significant amount of cost associated with that. There was other considerations there. Parking was another one that I remember being brought up. So there was a pretty long list of considerations.
Continue.
And might I, for the listening public, it was the IT part was a huge thing. And so if you weren't listening and somebody asks you, tell them to tune in or to call Rowan. So that's why.
Commissioner Gamble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate, and have always held, and not that it doesn't exist throughout the county in positions of making decisions, decision makers, but informed decisions. And we understand that the public in their lives and their responsibilities, things that go on that we don't always we're not always aware of everything that goes into making a decision. And this is why we want to create a culture in which you ask your questions, and hopefully we can give you a forthright response and walk you through the process. And I've always believed in leadership positions that you involve people because they refine your processes. They help us to see things we don't see. But when we have an answer that shows that we've done our due diligence, we've looked at these things, another example I think that speaks to leadership, present leadership in the county, is that when we had the proposal coming relative to the transfer station, that there was a building that maybe we wanted to look at. And again, we were far along in the process, but because we're trying to cultivate healthy relationships within the county and demonstrate that we do listen, actively listen, that staff went out and took a look at that building. And when I heard that, I said, there's things that you look in the short term, but there's things in long term you need to constantly be aware of, and that's cultivating relationships where the community believes that they can trust you, that they are heard, and that we're forthcoming in addressing things. And so I've appreciated that, and I appreciate all of the effort that was invested in this decision, in using a facility and looking at all the aspects that are affected in making a decision. And when the public comes alongside and can see that demonstrated, then we are making informed decisions that weigh all of these issues. So I think that's a good thing. It's a good thing for the present, and it's a good thing long-term in cultivating good relationships.
So we've been asked to approve the courthouse basement remodel. Are there any other questions or comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to share my perspective and experience, and remembering the Bouch building conversations before that, and then following on with Brooke and Rowan and Commissioner Sullivan, just through all the different options, and then also having a chance to tour the GES building, and not previously seeing the expansion, really, I guess the downstairs, but not the upstairs. I was very, very impressed and blown away about the size of it and just the potential there. And I was pretty excited, especially with proximity to law enforcement and just some of the displacement that'll be happening there while we do our project. But really really the factor for me is what the cost of this basement remodel is going to be. And so weighing that next to rent was kind of the deciding factor. And if the remodel would have been a whole lot more, well, it might be a different conversations. But where it landed, I feel like it's a good investment, just like Brooke and Rowan said, with our resources and considering all the options, it makes a lot of sense. So and just to speak to some public comments there with Howard, it's not necessarily that we're so far along, it's just that we had to find that number out in order for us to move in any direction. And so it just so happened that the costs that will be incurred for us and that investment is a better use of funds. So it's not so much timing as just the nuts and bolts, I'd say.
Commissioner Gallo?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brady, can you speak to the funding?
Well, this funding will come out of our bonds that we issued last year for the CIP.
Okay.
That we named the courthouse, the law enforcement center, and the highway department for those funds. We'll have to change some of that, the allocation amounts, and we'll do that when we get closer and know the exact amounts to match what our CIP plan said for those bonds, but it's all allowable and it's in there, so we have plenty of funds for that. So.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Well, I just wanted to thank Brooke for all his work on this. It's been quite a journey over the last couple of years, looking at our needs and trying to figure out how to best meet those needs in a fiscally responsible fashion. And I think this is a great piece of work for our county over the long haul. We're putting money into a facility that we're going to use for many, many years to come. It's a very wise investment. And with that, I'd like to make a motion to approve the courthouse basement remodel.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other comments or questions?
Yes, could you explain for the listening public what the amount is? Well, I'll tell them. $295,353.17. What part of that would have been spent anyway, an estimate, for just the deferred maintenance that we would have to do anyway? Would it be, do you have a guess on that, Brooke?
I would guess, I mean, it's much, much less. I mean, the deferred maintenance down there would just be the mold remediation. So it would have been a demo and a remodel of one storage room, probably looking at $15,000 to $20,000.
Oh,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
it's
not-
something we would have done anyway.
Yep, we would have done that anyway. I mean, another nice thing is we're addressing storage down there, and it's kind of motivated departments to get down and clean out, and we're finding out that storage may not be as big of an issue as we thought it was, as things are getting cleaned out, and we're gonna bring some stuff down to the Historical Society that they will store for us, and things are getting shredded that are past time that we need to save them, so it's working out well.
Thanks.
Any other comments or questions? We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you for all your work.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 7, MIS, approval of selling equipment through Minnesota bid.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So MIS has a fair amount of equipment through just regular replacement schedule and less operational use, some large format printers, as well as the security cameras, the CCTV cameras that we replaced the last go-around when we replaced them. And they're all functional, and with the combined value, it makes sense for us to try to recover some costs by selling them on the MN bid site, putting the time in to go through that process with this amount of equipment and this value. Makes sense for us to spend the time, and in checking with Auditor Powers, a requirement is that the approval makes it into the board minutes. And so with that, the equipment's listed, but I would stand for any questions, and we're, as stated, seeking approval to sell this equipment that's been taken out of service through the MN bid site and try to recover some cost.
Commissioner Gamble?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Any chance we could sell it for $295,000?
See how everybody's feeling when they bid, I guess.
Do you put pictures of all the cameras, and are there pictures of all this?
Yeah, so there'll be, I think what we'll look to do is individual pictures of individual models. So you'll see there's 57 total dome cameras. We probably won't have 57 pictures for,
No.
but, one of each, trying to accurately show and describe what they are, and as you would with anything selling, address any use or wear or tear or condition that they're in.
Sure. Well, any questions or comments? Commissioner Sullivan?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the selling of the listed items from MIS through the MN bid site.
Support.
Any further comments or questions? We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Good luck with all that.
Thank you.
Moving on to Human Resources. Allison will give us some more updating.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I've got a few items listed. They're all very similar. But the first one is separated out, as I'm going to actually hand this over to Administrator Watkins to address and bring forth, given the conflict of interest.
Yeah, Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you. The first item under Human Resources is the Human Resources Director job. So the conflict of interest there, I've worked with Tessa from DDA, our consultant, to follow the process that Allison typically does for all staff, the reviewing and updating of job descriptions. Just taking her out of the loop for obvious conflict of interest purposes. And following the recommendation from Tessa and DDA based on the job description, their recommendation is to move from a grade 220 to a grade 240. And then we would, of course, follow the normal process where when changing grades, you move back in step to be closest with your current hourly rate. And so that's the first item and the one that I have some insight into. And so if there's any questions on that, I'd be happy to do my best to answer them.
Questions or comments?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the job description, updated job description and change in job grade for HR director from 220 to 240.
Support?
Questions or comments? Commissioner Gamble?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. You will find that on these upgrades and things, it has nothing to do with the individuals. It has everything to do with the premise or the basis under which these motions are being made, these recommendations. And in my experience in working with Keystone Study and doing comp studies and looking and being on the personnel committee, looking at job evaluations and things and how we score all of these things, again, it has nothing to do with the individuals and the good work they do. It has everything to do with the premise upon which we make these decisions, and that is linked to the Keystone Study. And so you will have noted that in previous recommendations in this regard, I mean no disrespect towards individuals, but until I've tried to work to make a comparable study similar to the structure that was in our first comp study done relative to comparable counties. And so I will not be supporting these motions until I can look at things that are based upon a premise that is more in keeping and fitting with who we are as a county.
The upgrades, are they done every 2 to 3 years? When you're all finished with this, then when would be the next look at everything?
So most of the jobs that I'm still bringing forth are our initial 2-year cycle where we're reviewing all of the job descriptions. So hopefully that, we were hoping to wrap that up at the end of 2024. So this is just a little kind of rolling over into the next year. Then on an ongoing maintenance basis, it'll be a 3-year cycle. Every year we will review 1/3 of the positions, just to make sure that they still remain update and be proactive and progressive in that.
Okay, just wanted the time frame on all that, because you've been working really hard for the last couple years for sure, or at least a year and a half.
Year and a half almost, yeah.
Any other comments or questions? Commissioner White?
So then, when the department heads do their evaluations, are those or assessments, excuse me, of their employees, I'm assuming that should an employee not be meeting the standards, or they're identified as needing to do X, Y, and Z. This is in your job description. But if their performance is not what it should be, and there's been intervention to help, an intervention to help the employees better perform their job, what's the next step? I mean, if we're in the cycle of reviewing the job description, and now this position should be receiving a higher grade, a different level, is this particular employee benefits from everything? I mean, does it really work that way here, that if an employee is not meeting the mark, job performance, what happens?
Go ahead, Rowan.
Well, I would just say that, there's the steps within a grade and then there's the grade. And so when we're looking at the grade, that has to do with the job description and the comparables that have been referenced and where that fits within the market. And then the steps, I think, is maybe in what you're asking about in reference, and when there's, typically, you get an annual review, and within that annual review form, there's a checkbox for a supervisor to fill out whether or not the increased step is recommended or not. And so I think,
Okay.
you know, when we're talking about where a position gets graded, that has to do with the level of responsibilities and the other keystone factors that grade it. But then the progression of steps is something that happens typically on an annual basis, and there's room for that conversation to happen within the annual review process.
Right. Our handbook does include language that we don't necessarily have a merit-based system in terms of, like Rowan said, we follow steps based on their yearly anniversary. But the handbook language does allow those steps to be withheld if the employee is not meeting the performance standards that would be expected. And outside of that, there are processes to identify subpar performance, and that would be kind of a completely different process in working with the employee to identify what is needed of them and the ways to support them to meeting those goals, and usually that would involve a performance improvement plan.
Okay.
Continue.
And then, so, the Keystone this is comparative. Is this comparative just within our county or comparative with Lake County? I mean, is the job that say, our eligibility specialist does in Cook County, is it compared to what they do in Lake County?
Are you referring to the actual position or the grade and the associated
The position.
pay? So, these positions, the grading is first using the grading structure of the Keystone Matrix, but then the kind of comparable rates that we use to do our compensation study, what we're paying people at these grades and steps, is utilizing the benchmarks that the benchmark committee went through and identifying and using those as the comparables to help determine where these rates should fall in relation to the market so we can recruit and retain staff. In terms of the actual position, the functions of the position, that's going to be very unique to the counties and may not be comparable to the same position like an eligibility specialist, say in St. Louis County, just given the nature of county structures can be different, workloads are different, staffing levels are different. Having been an eligibility specialist, for example, for this one, I know that this role, this job description would be very different than, say, an eligibility specialist in Lake County, St. Louis County, Carleton County, because they have, again, kind of veered their roles to whatever is required for them in those particular counties. Our eligibility specialists, for example, and we'll talk about these descriptions next, they do a lot. They work in all program areas where in a lot of counties, they have multiple eligibility specialists that actually just focus on one specific singular program. So there's multiple factors that go in, but in terms of the grading and the associated rates, those are really driven by the comparables that were selected for the compensation study.
Okay, so for each county, the comparables, I mean, we set the market value here, I mean, so ours are not necessarily the standard that every county goes by.
For the
Well,
pay.
So if you're, whatever your job description is, it's dry in here. Whatever your job description is, the rate of pay that you get is not necessarily the same as what you would get, even if all of the pieces of your job were the same. It's not necessarily what you would get in a county of a similar size. down the shore someplace.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yep. So when the benchmarks were selected, what was this, back in 2022? A committee that worked several months to compile those benchmarks. Then that information is now handled by DDA. And out of all of the benchmarks and all of the different varying positions that all of the counties have and the similar positions to what we're reviewing, there's an average, there's a min and a max and an average of taking all of that data. So for example, like the HR director position, eligibility specialist, there's going to be an average of all those benchmarks of those positions. Again, there's going to be some differences and similarities with, like, say, eligibility specialists. And then when the board approved the compensation study, the pay philosophy approved at that time was that the county was going to strive to be within 95% of that average market rate driven by those benchmark counties.
Okay, that was another opportunity for people to try to understand this. Thank you.
Thank you for asking those questions.
So we have a motion and a second. Any other comments or questions? So I have a motion to respectfully recommend the approval of the job description and updates for the Human Resource Director. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Passes 4-1 being against. Okay, moving on.
Okay. So then back to me to present the next two job descriptions that have gone through the review process with DDA. As we were just talking about, I have the eligibility specialist job description. So the updates to the job description and a recommended change in job grade from a 150 to a 160. There are 4 individuals that this will impact. We have 4 eligibility specialists in public health human services. And then the other one is our behavioral health services clinical manager. This also includes an updated job description and a recommendation of a change in job grade, currently from a 200 to a 210.
Questions or comments?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the job description updates for eligibility specialist as well as the behavioral health services / clinical manager. And I'd also like to include the change in job grade for eligibility specialists from 150 to 160, and then for the behavioral health services clinical manager from 200 to 210.
Support.
Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, 4-1. Aye and 1 opposed. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And then I have one more job description update. I separated this out because this was not a part of the DDA review process. So in your packet is the job description for the highway clerk. In the consent agenda, we brought forth the retirement notice of Nanette Silence. It is good practice when there is transition in a position such as a retirement to review the job description, again, to ensure that it is accurate and reflects the current duties, so that is up to date. The highway clerk position, the job description did go through the DDA review process. I believe that position was in really the first round of reviews, so back in the summer of 2023. And in reviewing the job description, in preparing to post it and recruit for that next individual, it was discovered that there was a missing required certification license from the job description. And looking back at my records, it appears that licensure has always been reflected, or always has, in the most recent iterations of job descriptions, has been included in that. And that is because the role of the highway clerk includes managing the fueling facility that we have, so that license is required in order to complete that job function. But for some reason, somehow it got excluded and left off when it was actually brought to the board for final approval. So I want to bring that back and reapprove the job description, adding back in that previous licensure. So it's the MPCA Class B operator's license, and someone can either have that coming into the position, otherwise most often they would be obtaining that within the first 6 months.
Questions or comments? Commissioner Gamble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you tell me with that, changing the job description to note that and make that a part of the requirement, how that affects grade and level of pay?
It won't affect it at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when it went through the DDA process, my records show that this was included previously in that review process. And given that this license is typically required, most people probably won't have this going into the actual recruiting process, and they would obtain this afterwards. There's no impact in terms of minimum requirements that would increase the grade or pay for this position.
Right. And Madam Chair, as a follow-up, so it's a requirement, and now that we've noted it, that whoever comes in, should they have that, otherwise we will equip them, in other words, provide it so that they will meet that qualification. Is that correct?
Yes, so this would be considered training for
Yeah.
purposes of fulfilling the required job functions and requirements. So this would go into the training budget of the
Yeah.
highway
Thank you.
department. Yep.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the updated job description for the highway clerk.
I'd support that.
Any further questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we're moving along here. Wow. So we'll go to item number 9, Auditor Brady.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is a request to authorize sending a notice of withdrawal from MCIS Payroll. The background on this is the county's been looking at moving away from MCIS Payroll for about 7 years. We actually attempted it once in 2018, 2019. That did not go successfully, but the plan remained, and the reason is that we're not integrated with our HR system and our payroll system. MCIS has an HR system, but it's not a well-developed one. They would acknowledge that. So we're trying to have a well-integrated system that removes all the double entry. There's a lot of double entry within the HR system for all employees. So this is double entering on 130-some employees in both systems. That's probably the single biggest reason. Other reasons, there are better reporting systems in other payroll systems. So we've come a long way since that first try many years ago, and there's been a team of MIS, HR, and Auditor's Office Payroll looking at this, and we think UKG is probably our best solution. We're not ready to bring that with you with a contract yet. We're still working with them. In fact, we're working with them later today. But we've looked at it with other counties. A real similar county is Cass, who uses it and still has e-time, because we need e-time. We're not ready to move away from it, primarily because Highway, their cost accounting system, works closely with e-time, and it's complicated. And Cass works the same way. And so it works very well with them. We've been to their facility. So we're still working on that. But the reason I'm coming today is that MCIS, because of their budgeting function, they need to know this by April 1st. That's in our joint powers agreement with them. We have to notify so that they can make plans with staff, et cetera, on where they're going to work, et cetera. So we'd notify them now that we'd want to end services by the end of the year. So unless we want to keep being charged next year. So we need to do this now in preparation. And as a backup, the last time we did this, we gave them notice. The transfer to a new system wasn't working well. We stopped, and we went back to MCIS and said, please ignore our request. We want to stay with you, and we've stayed with them for many years. And they would do that again if something went awry, let's say. So, but this is a necessary step at this point, so.
Commissioner Campbell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brady, you identified that there's some redundancy, the way it's set up right now, using their, services. And I guess what I would say is when you evaluate it, why we're going to change, part of that is because we're seeing some redundancy. There might be other efficiency issues in our changeover. How does it affect then our ongoing costs? When we compare all these, if we gain efficiency and it's more streamlined, and how does it affect costs going to a new provider?
Yeah, what we've seen in the costs with Cass County and some other counties is that our base charge would be less than we're paying now. And it's possible that there are other things that you might want to implement. And of course, they're going to charge, for those things. I can't anticipate what those would be, but the base charge looks to be less than we're paying now. And the reality is that MCIS is down to just a few counties now. If we go, what we talked about in strategic planning was if one more county went, then they will plan to end payroll. So we're going to be in this, people have been moving away from MCIS for years. I mean, it used to be maybe 10, 12 counties at one point, and they've all slowly been moving off to other systems because they're integrated better reporting, less manual. If you talk to Nick, he has to keep track of things. He has little spreadsheets and things that he has to keep track of when he's entering things into payroll. More of this will be automated in this system too. So it'll be a shorter process also. And we're going to face this reality. If we don't do it, we're going to face it in a year or 2 or 3 when it gets down to that last one anyway. So seems like a good time.
Madam Chair, as a follow-up, and thank you, Brady. So it appears that on the basis of gained efficiency and potential savings based upon other counties' experience, and depending upon an unknown that we don't know whether we'd use additional features that they could provide for us, but at this point, looking at the comparables, it would be more cost-effective, and if in fact on the horizon it looks like they aren't going to exist, that we be putting ourselves in a position where we sort of control the transition as opposed to being forced to do it. So, yeah.
Some of that.
Commissioner White?
MCIS, would you please explain what that acronym means?
Minnesota County's Information Systems. It's a joint powers. It's really owned by several counties. So it's a staff that works over in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, in a building like this. And they do this for, their main function is tax. They were created to manage the tax system in Minnesota. Everybody has a company like this because our tax system is so complicated, and that is what they really excel at. But they expanded over the years into things that counties asked them to do. Like they were doing manual payroll, or they had some system that didn't work. And so MCIS said, okay, they dug in and created a payroll system. But they don't have enough staff, enough counties, whatever, to make the kind of functional changes that big companies that have lots of experience and lots of staff can make. They just can't do it. But they're willing to continue with it as long as there are enough counties that want it. So you don't feel like we're hurting our joint powers. They'll just reallocate staff towards their main functions. And I think that's the...
Yes, Rowan.
And Rowan.
Yeah, just add for the context of the group makeup of the joint powers agreement, there's 12 counties, and 12 of 12 use them for property tax. As Brady mentioned, they're primary, the CAMA. They're down to 5, including us, for payroll. And so as that dwindles, it's a service that they would look at ceasing to provide.
Yeah, they'd be down to 4 without us, and we decided during strategic planning if it went to 3, it just isn't functional for them to provide the resource for that.
Commissioner Campbell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The other thing to be mindful in that is that if they have a primary function which they feel that they're very good at, and they have a reputation for being good at, that if that other side thing that they do, they aren't going to necessarily focus their energies on that. They're doing it more as a courtesy, it seems, as the participants dwindle. So-
They've tried and provided other types of services too, but that, they are really good at tax.
Yeah.
And so we want to keep them for that, and we want them to focus on that too, so.
Yeah, yeah.
That make it, who knows, that may get tougher for them in the future, but they are really good at that, so.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? I'll make a motion to authorize the county auditor to send a notice of withdrawal to MCIS payroll before April 1st of 2025.
I support the motion.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Item 10, administrator updates.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. We'll start with the Law Enforcement Center expansion. Yesterday, boring was done for core sampling to help inform foundations to move forward. We meet this Thursday to do a phasing implementation, and that's where we'll just talk about what areas of the building will be under construction for how many different periods of time, and what is our operational plan behind that to ensure that services continue, obviously. So dispatch is a key factor there, as well as transporting for deputies and others as we move through this larger project, just making a good phasing plan and making sure that staff from the sheriff's office are informing that, and that we have a good functional plan to move forward. The next couple milestone dates that we have on our plan would be March 25th, and that's when our construction manager, Johnson Wilson, will come back with updated pricing based on the presentation that we had with them with BKV, and the inclusion of the recommended deferred maintenance that are associated with the law enforcement center. And then there's several meetings in between here, but the next one tentatively would be May 27th, where they would come back and look for board approval to move to bidding. And then from there, the next timeline would be June 24th. Again, tentatively would be looking at a board meeting to approve bids and begin construction following that. So that's the update I have on the Law Enforcement Center project. I'd pause there if there's questions on that one.
Commissioner Mills?
Is that following our original timeline pretty closely?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Yep, we're still on track. I think, originally when we first started looking at this, we're hoping to start construction a little bit sooner, but as we got kind of into more of the nuts and bolts meetings of the design schematic, that shifted a little. But still looking to start in June, and with a precast building, looking to have it enclosed before winter, and allowing construction to continue to move forward. The next item, if there's no other questions on that, I would talk about would be the transfer station. We continue to make progress on the ground lease and the facility use lease. We've had good conversations with North Shore Waste and Attorney Peterson, and being well informed with our bond attorney to make sure that the language is correct so that we can secure tax exempt bonds. And that's the most time that I personally have spent in conversation with it, but I know permitting is going on on the background as well, so we're doing a lot of local county permitting. In fact, this week, I believe, we'll be coming before Board of Adjustment and Planning Commission to move forward with the necessary permits there, and then after that's complete, move forward to the state permitting. And still moving along on a good timeline there as well. Yeah, please.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Rowan, and maybe Dustin could speak to this as well, as that the permitting thing, which we've talked about, is, at the local level and the commitment, to fulfill that requirement, but the state level, just any sense of how things are going, or if they're all looking forward to us coming and kind of walk things through.
Sure, so I've been in communication with the Pollution Control Agency. That's really the longest permit. Originally when we had the conversations, they say that the permit can take as long as a year. I think some of that information was coming from if you're trying to start a landfill. When I was talking to the local permitting guy down in St. Paul, he thought that a transfer station permit would take about 6 months to get. He suggested that I send him a copy of the permit application at the same time that I send it through, because sometimes it can take as much as a month to get to him. And he didn't have any problem with us starting with construction while it's going through the permitting process as well. So he said that's a pretty common thing, just knowing that a lot of the things that might need to change would all be above ground, where we'll be working on this stuff underground while the permitting's going through.
So what's your comfort level?
It's good. Yeah,
Good.
yeah, I feel pretty good about it. The design team has reviewed all the regulations by the Pollution Control Agency. We were really fortunate that the gentleman that we've been working with is super helpful, and you don't always get that on a state level. But we call him, and he's excited about the project and knows what we're talking about, and calls you by your first name. He seems like a pretty good guy.
Those are all good indicators. So.
Yeah, right. It was a breath of relief for me when I found out it was him. So
Thank you.
yeah.
The other one I'd typically update on would be the basement remodel, but we covered that. So I'll move to administrator hiring tomorrow, Wednesday, March 12th at 8:30 a.m. The board and DDA will begin interviews. Those will be live streamed, and we've shared a press release, but I'd mention it here as well that there is a public feedback form on our website that a link to it that will go live starting at 8:30 tomorrow. We don't want anyone to fill it out until the interviews have started. So if you've tried it and it doesn't work, that's why.
I took a peek.
Did you? Okay. Yep. And so it'll be live 8:30 when the interviews actually start, and then following that, the next day, 8:30 the next morning, the board will reconvene and discuss further. Those are the updates that I have.
Any questions, Commissioner Marais?
Would you tell the audience how many people we're interviewing?
We have 2 finalists.
Any other questions or comments? I'm going to backtrack just a minute because we approved the consent agenda, but I failed to mention one important one at the end, and I just want to publicly, that we approve the appointment of Ben Halbert, a representative, and Lindsay Milkey, who's the alternate, for the Northeast Minnesota 911 Public Safety Answering Point. I wanted to make sure that I got that publicly out there. Okay, so,
One more thing.
yes, Commissioner White.
And we pulled out Nanette silence and thanked her, but there was another resignation by Scott.
Scott
And,
Bilkin, I did mention that.
Oh, did we thank him? Thank you, Scott.
We did,
Okay.
too. Another thank you is always appreciated, I'm sure. Okay, so I know we have a lot to talk about with our visit to the Capitol and all our reports, so I think right now, let's just take a break and be ready for the next auditor event, which is the public hearing at 10 o'clock. Because we have some of these to look at, and we'll clear our mind for the public hearing. So we have these, We'll resume at, right at 10 o'clock. Okay, this is another set.
I'll back up.
We are now back at our board meeting, and it is 10 a.m. And we're now going to go into our public hearing in regards to establishing rates and charges for solid waste management and services provided by Cook County. So I will open the public meeting and turn it over to Brady.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is, you're looking at an ordinance to establish rates and charges for solid waste management services. Following today's meeting, this public hearing portion, the board could approve an ordinance to establish those charges. For solid waste, the rates and charges would go into effect in tax year 2026 and would be used for financing the main transfer station facility to be constructed in Grand Marais and the auxiliary facilities to be built and improved in Hoveland and Tofty. So some background purpose. Counties have responsibility for solid waste, as Tim Nelson can tell us. So in Minnesota Statute 400-01, it states that it's in the public interest that counties conduct solid waste management programs to protect the state's water, air, and land resources so as to promote public safety, health, and welfare. And that's what, there's a department we have that does that. It goes further in 400.04 saying giving the county the authority to construct and improve solid waste facilities and to enter into contracts for maintenance and operation of properties and facilities. And that's what we've talked about over the last many months, for the county to build a facility and through contracts, leases, to have the private entity maintain and operate that facility. So the purpose of the fees, proposed fees, is to fund the creation of the facilities through bonds, and these would make the bond payments through the fees. And the reason that the fees are structured, as we've talked about, fees on parcels, is to spread it, as widely, kind of a compromise between spreading it as widely and evenly as possible, but keeping it as simple and reduce the complexity of the management of the fees. So that's kind of a compromise. Make it wide, keep the fees as low as possible. We've got two rates, Tier 1 and Tier 2, as you see. Residential type properties paying the lower $50 tier fee, and then the commercial type properties paying the higher fee of $100, but across all the taxable parcels and lands on parcels, rather than trying to identify individual units within parcels. So it's a compromise, but that's what we have before us today, and that's what we've talked about at previous meetings.
So I would ask if there's any comments from the general public. Good morning, Mike. State your name.
Mike Harrelson, 1655 East Highway 61. I appreciate this ordinance for the most part, and its simplicity, yes, but it may have gone a little too far in simplicity. It seems wrong that an apartment building of 5 units would pay the same as an apartment building of 50, likewise for resorts. So maybe not in this version, but maybe next year, you might consider something that's going to be a little bit more flexible for the charges. $50 a year doesn't seem outrageous, even though I know I only pay about $50 a year for garbage service right now because I deliver my bags directly. But nevertheless, I think the ordinance is reasonable. Just think that it may be too simple. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that distinction probably should be made again, that this is for the facility, and people pay for disposal of their waste now. That won't change. And whatever fee large commercial operations are paying, they'll continue to pay whatever the market requires them to pay, and the same for individuals. And this is outside of all of that. This is considered a general county responsibility. So, good comment. We've looked at a very simple structure. You can change the structure. You have to go through public process whenever you do that, notices, public hearings, but you can change. It isn't necessarily forever what you do approve.
Any other comments from the public? Hearing no other public comments, I will close the public hearing, and we can discuss it among ourselves about the fee and how we eventually came to this, and we've all been a part of that process. So any comments or questions on this? Commissioner Gamble.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think it's important, and we've stated it, but you can't state it enough, and to Commissioner's White point, making the public aware of actions we take and things that we're considering, that this basically is a partnership between North Shore Waste and the county, with the county owning the building and North Shore Waste facilitating the collection of what would be refuge as well as potentially recyclables, which now the county is responsible for, and taxpayers are paying a significant portion of that in the levy. So this would be a good thing to merge the two and eliminate that cost that taxpayers are paying right now. And in the state statute that defines the county's ability to fund this through an assessment, which is basically what we're doing. And I think the confusion is that when we talk about this and using the statute language says service charges, and it can be confusing because when you go in now, you're charged a service charge for depositing your refuge. This is what we're talking about, has nothing to do with the cost of dropping off waste. It has to do with funding the facility, which the county will own. And so in essence, it's an assessment. The way that we can do that is we can do that by adding it through levy, or we can do it by having an assessment that is added to your annual tax, and the board then was tasked with trying to determine how we are going to make that fair and equitable in its distribution. So initially, when we had tasked Bob in the assessor's office to look at this, we came up with a parcel, and we had Tier 1 and Tier 2. Tier 1 was vacant land, residential, seasonal, recreational, and personal property, which amounted to 8,145 parcels, or at least taxable entities. And then Tier 2 included apartments, resorts, commercial beer land, commercial property, and utility. Those amounted to 417. So when we looked at the initial assessment, we looked at $50 for the residential, which was $8,145, which amounted to $407,000 for the $107,250 a year. The $100 for the 417 Tier 2 amounted to $41,700. That combined then is an annual assessment of $448,550, which if you took that over a period of 13 years with the estimated cost of the facility, the unfunded portion that has not come through grants and other means of securing funds to build the facility, that's about $5.8 million is what we've estimated. It would take 13 years to retire that cost for the bonding. And so a part of the question, or what we're looking at as commissioners, is what do we want that annual assessment to be for those two different tier groups, and how long do we want the term of this to be, recognizing that if it's the board's responsibility to maintain that facility, to contribute to capital improvements, and maintenance, which needs to be defined clearly in the contract so that North Shore Waste knows what maintenance they will conduct and what maintenance we will conduct as owners of the building. So that should be done. And then what we will do after that 13-year period as to keeping money that we can have for that ongoing capital improvement and maintenance, but would not necessarily certainly have to be at the rate established to fund the project to begin with. So I had attempted to call Brady yesterday, and he had some understandable commitments, so I just briefly talked to him this morning, and I handed out a document that I felt in looking at what we had set that 50 and 100 at, and then we had a public comment period previous, and I think the understanding with this is what we're paying to drop off our garbage, and certainly commercial would have more garbage than I would. But again, this is an assessment. It has nothing to do with the charges relative to the disposal of waste. And so what the commissioners have before them is a handout that just says if we did the $50 as proposed and as in the proposed document that we have before us today, and the 100 for the Tier 2, or if we were to look at a different distribution that more fairly represents what we're talking about as use of the facility, that if we were to change those, there's different calculations here that shows what that distributive share would be amongst the Tier 1 and Tier 2. So I present it for the board's consideration. The other thing in looking at the document that was before us is that I think the confusion that there is, and I can understand it in looking at the statute, is that this really is not a fee for garbage. This is an assessment to build a facility that the county will own and continue to update and maintain. So in my estimation, what we're doing is we're not establishing rates and charges, which gives the illusion of what it costs to dump refuge. We are establishing an annual assessment fee in connection with financing the construction of future improvements and maintenance costs for 3 solid waste transfer facilities to be owned by the county and to be located in Grand Marais, Hovland, and Tofte within Cook County, Minnesota. If that language were consistently in there, it would represent intent. And in discussion with Brady, because this document that's in the packet and available to the public online has the language rates and charges, I think that's where part of the confusion is. So if in legal compliance, and when I look at the state statute, I think we would be consistent with requirement if the language were to represent, in fact, what we are doing is financing the construction. And so that's a discussion to be had.
Comments or questions now? Commissioner Mills?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Gene and Brady, if we change the language per Commissioner Gamble's recommendation, would that require any second hearing or further hearing, or how would that affect?
I'll defer to Gene, but if we change the language, anything, we'll have to republish and have another hearing at this time. Yeah.
I would also respond that the language in the statute, 400.08 subdivision 3, the county may establish by ordinance, revise when deemed advisable, and collect just and reasonable rates and charges for solid waste management, services provided by the county or by others. So that's the language pulled straight from the statute.
Yeah, there may be other ways that we can clarify the use of it without changing it in this ordinance, but I'd certainly want to bring it back to our bond attorney before making that change here. And we couldn't do it here. We'd have to propose it here and then have a public hearing again.
Right. Commissioner Nelson?
Yeah, and just considering, we have had a hearing scheduled for this, and it's been in conversation, and considering the public comments we had today, I think it's, it makes sense to revisit this. I just don't want to delay this project at this point. And so I think that, to Commissioner Gamble's point, this clarification would be very valuable. But it's kind of on us to communicate what's going on if there is confusion at this point, and then we can set it in a more clear ordinance in a month if we wanted to. It's just that right now, to keep things going, that we need to act.
Okay. Commissioner White?
But did not Dustin just say that they can proceed without the permits? So would that give us time? Would that fall in with the right time frame? Like if we were to redo this ordinance and get it right the first time? And I don't know if he has the answer to that. Maybe it's Gene, the attorney.
I don't know that I do have the answers for that. I mean, we have a lot of balls rolling right now. I mean, this afternoon, we have a meeting to finalize the plan so that we can put bids out in the next 10 days or so, so that construction can start in April. Dollar-wise, I don't know how changing this affects the availability of money as the project starts moving forward. Is it just 2 more weeks and you change some wording? Permit-wise, I don't know that this would affect it at all, as long as the intention is to move forward. On the permit, we have to provide the conditional use permit. We have to have the signature of the board, the signature of Tim Nelson. We have a land use permit and things like that. I'm not exactly sure what you're talking about now affects that.
Commissioner Gamble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the questions to be answered relative to what we're considering is how it affects you. I do not believe it affects you, other than the fact that we need to get final costs. So our projected number that we're basing this assessment on needs to be realistic, number one. And if we change, let's just say, if we change the language to be consistent with what we draft in the lease, which I think is advisable, then we need to ask those that drafted this document. And as I look at the statute, yes, the language is, in the statute states what it states, but based upon what our intention is, and when it talks about financing facility, there is a reference to assessment. So I think that's a question that just needs to be asked so that we make sure that the document is consistent with the provision of statute. And as to having to repost, should we make a determination to revisit the proposed language? Should we make a decision to revisit the proposed assessment? That would necessitate the public hearing, which Brady can say posting requires this much time, and we could have that. And if it doesn't delay you, but it's more in keeping with what we've heard from the public and what our intention is, then my recommendation is that we would choose to try to visit that. I would agree. We don't want to hold things up to be nitpicky, but in my experience, when it's drafting language that we're accountable to, I think it's best to have things consistent and in order with what our intention is.
Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes. Attorney Peterson, I understand that this language is parallel to what we have in state statute. When I read it, it makes sense to me, given this is a facility for solid waste management services. Can you address what the difference would be in the proposed elimination of some of that language versus using the statute?
Not accurately without a new proposed language. I can say that this language in the ordinance is pulled from, I didn't draft it, appears to be pulled from and is definitely authorized under the the statute as written. So without a proposal on specific language, I have a hard time saying whether that would be advisable, appropriate, or otherwise.
It seems to me that, Madam Chair and Board, that using this language that already exists in Minnesota statute would be wise, and that our task is to communicate clearly to the public what this means.
That's the view that I look at it, but any other comments on this? Commissioner Gamble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brady, correct me. The drafting of the document that's in our packet was drafted by,
Freiberger, the
Right.
attorneys there.
yeah.
Bob
And-
Tofty and,
Right. And so my recommendation would be to get their opinion relative to that. The other thing is that in documents that we have drafted in relationship with entities within the county, in my previous service on the board, that 3 or 4 times I would go through documentation to make the language was consistent with intent, so that if none of us existed and somebody picked it up, it was clarity as to what intent was. And so I think in weighing all the different things, we need an opinion from the people that drafted the documentation to say whether or not this language is consistent, because it is consistent with intent. And then if, in fact, we choose to take a look at a more equitable distribution of the assessment, that would necessitate a public hearing as well. So in response to looking at an equitable configuration as to what the assessment is, I think there's options that would be more equitable when you look at, and some of the, correspondence I've got from individuals that have commented to me about it as to how we might distribute that monies. So when you have such a bulk of like 8,000 compared to 400, obviously every dollar, there's a significant change because you're drawing from a bigger pool. But I don't think that should drive the decision. I think the decision should be based upon an equitable distribution based upon overall use.
Commissioner White?
Well, and it's very clear, C, 2.01C, we're stating it's for the solid waste facilities annual assessment. It's for the solid waste facilities annual assessment fee. There's the management services, all of that is deleted. So this clearly says that we're talking about the facility, not the trash, or dealing with the trash. So.
Where does it say that?
Oh, this is the document that Commissioner Gamble handed out.
Right, so in what he gave us.
Yeah, it's very clear.
It's very clear.
Mm-hmm.
And indeed, still, it's incumbent on us or to educate or to get the information very clearly stated that this is for the building. This is not for getting your trash picked up on a weekly basis.
Commissioner Milne?
So practically, how would this affect our timeline, Brady, as far as, is there any disadvantage? I mean, it's more rigmarole, but to Commissioner Gamble's point, it is valuable to have this intent clearly stated.
Yeah, well, Gene, I think we would need to agree on this, but I'd want to bring the language back. We'd have to have a meeting with Ehlers and Freiberger, come to, and I don't know if they would, what their advice would be, but then would you set a public hearing now to reconsider it, to go in the paper today for another date certain? Which would be, it could be the March 25th, I believe.
Or April 8th?
Or we do have time on April 8th, but they're actually, on their schedule, they're putting together the preliminary official statement. This is part of it. So it may put them back on some of these official documents. I'd want to speak with them. I'd love to have them here to say, yeah, they may have other things on their schedule. They may not be able to drop everything for what we need also. I expect they would, but I wouldn't be certain of that.
So I guess I'm just wondering.
Without speaking to them, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what consequence, I mean, it might push things back, and I guess what I'm wondering
Yeah.
is, what does that mean for us?
Well, on the schedule that we're on right now, we'd be scheduling sale of bonds and closing by May 13th, and then we'd actually have the proceeds in our hands by June 4th, as we're doing right currently. But the other thing is we're also trying, if we use another issue, jail bonding versus CIP. If we agree on jail bonding, then that will be this schedule, but if we change for some reason and issue the LEC bonds under, we're trying to coincide the two bondings, so that's another complication in all this, then that would push the dates off another month. If we didn't use jail bonding, we use CIP because of publication notices, et cetera. And why I'm bringing that up is if this would cause, because of discussion, decisions, coming back, if it did the same as the using a CIP and having another public notice, et cetera, that pushes the bonds out approval to June 10th and the money in our accounts on July 2nd. So it moves it out a month.
What does that mean? How does that affect contractors or bids or the whole process? I'm just trying to get down to the rubber meets the road.
Yeah, I don't know specifically how that affects them, but it sounds like Dustin doesn't have any issue with moving ahead. We do have grant money for that project that we need to spend first, number one. Infrastructure with the one grant, the 425. But still, my point is, I'd like to have one of them at this meeting today to make that decision.
Can't call. Can't call.
We could try.
And Madam Chair, just to state,
Attorney Peterson?
Thank you. I just would respond that the board can make a business decision today on which way they want to go, but I would caution against doing an end run around language that's been set out specifically in the statute, because when you have terms of art that are defined in the statute, subdivision 3 addresses service charges. However, subdivision 2 is what authorizes those service charges. So you have a statute that says if a service area is established, the county board may impose service charges for solid waste management services in the area. The next subdivision lays out those service charges. So if you start to move language around for word preferences, it could have effects on the legality of what the board is doing.
Commissioner Gamble?
thank you, Madam Chair. And I certainly understand that. But the company that drafts the language, I mean, their opinion, will say that. And usually that's based upon court precedent when things are challenged, whether the language is consistent or not. So the decision, as simple as I could make it before the board, is that do we go with something that continues to confuse with the onus on us to clarify, and then in the lease agreement, try to be more specific where we're not necessarily having to use the exact language that's coming from state statute. So it is not trying to circumvent the statute, it's trying to be in keeping with the intent of the rule of the law, but having the drafter determine whether or not, and court precedent would say, that's certainly acceptable or not acceptable. The other issue relative to decision today is whether we want the document as drafted to be as stated, which is the 5,100, or that we want to look at a more equitable distribution based upon the feedback we've gotten from public. And the other thing to note is that if the funds that we have that need to be spent do not preclude beginning our work, and if we make a decision to change the assessment, that would necessitate another public hearing as it is. And I just put it out there. It should be understood that we did not see this. This is the first we've had an opportunity to look at it. And so this is the nature of the discussion that should come in result of just having our first exposure to something that we're making decisions on. And so that's just my input, and I certainly will go with the will of the board.
So are we looking at then the possibility of tabling this until Attorney Peterson and Brady and the law come
Unless
in?
Brady is comfortable seeing if you can catch him, but you know what your experience is in that regard, so I would say do what you would recommend.
Yeah, the person in charge of drafting it, I believe, his date of return from a vacation is
Okay.
March 13th.
Okay.
Commissioner Mills?
I think these details are important, but I am very comfortable leaning on state statute to proceed with our ordinance, and it's on us to communicate what our intentions are, and to have that language in the lease, I think, is very helpful and important, but it's not often that I have community members reading the ordinance and then being confused. If they are such that they'll read an ordinance, they have probably been following along with meetings and discussion and process. And so if they're that involved, then they have that perspective. If they're not, it's more of just like what's going on, and then I can explain it. At least that's how it's been, this last process. So I also would like to revisit how we distribute this, but not today and not right now. I think we can give it a year and then see how things are, because I think there is value in seeing the equity aspect of it. Right now, this is trying to balance the effectiveness and the simplicity, and leaning on the expertise of our assessor and auditor and just all of our professionals. This is what we have right now, and if we decide that we want to change this balance into a different way, which I'm very open to, I think we should do it next go around. Better to have some good progress than, what's that saying? Good progress than no perfection, or getting something perfect and not getting it done, or having something good but not perfect and getting it done.
Right.
I think it's important to move forward.
Commissioner White?
We don't need to strive for mediocrity.
Well said.
So,
Commissioner Gamble?
So, thank you, Madam Chair. The question is that if we say, let's not get it right now, and then we say we can always change it, the question is, can we change it? Because if we're making a resolution to approve something, we're saying this is the framework in which we move forward, which, if we're going to change it, what are the hoops we have to change it to do that? So we're trying to weigh the issues which we've identified with Dustin as how would this delay you? How does it delay the financing, which we said we have money that we need to spend or we lose it? And if the question is, can this language, which is more in keeping with intent, can that be? And we haven't answered that question from the individual that drafted the document. And we have a document that if we approve it, is going to lock us into the 5,100. And if that's what we're comfortable, and we've had people say, could you make this more equitable, even though we realize it is funding the facility, I think those are issues that we just need to address. So we've got a lot of unknowns, and we're going to make an assumption to move forward, and then we'll address it, which if we choose to address it in the future and be more precise at that point in time, what's involved in that, changing something that we made a commitment to, and we haven't addressed what happens after 13 years. We've got a YMCA right now with monies that end, on that, as to how long do we continue to fund something. I think in the state statute with the provision with the 1% monies that are coming from tax dollars, that it would go so long, but we, as a board, should say what our intent is, and granted, if boards change, that intent can change too in the language, but if we see this moving out, the public have a right to be informed as to expectation. Will this continue beyond 13 years, or is it there to fund the facility and then a revisit in order to have the pool of money that we've learned through lived experience that we need to move forward? That just seems reasonable.
I can answer the question, what I believe was the part of the question anyway, that the county may establish by ordinance and then revise when deemed advisable and collect in just and reasonable rates and charges for solid waste management services.
I don't really see where we're tied in for 13 years.
No, we aren't. It's open-ended.
Right.
And I'm saying
To be
there should,
reviewed, as we always do. We have something, we say, this is what we're going to go with, and then we review it at another year. How is it working? Or somebody will come and say, I've heard things aren't working out so well. Let's review what we've already established last year. Let's review it this year. So I think we should be open to reviewing, obviously, this and other things, but I don't see where we're tied into anything specific. Commissioner Gamble.
yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I would just say, given my experience and observation, the government, when they find a pool of money, it's very hard to let go of that pool of money. And so I think that anything that identifies, even in the language of the thing, that this would be revisited, and you can, if it doesn't happen in the 13 years because something is a variable in the bids, then the intent is stated that it is to cover our costs. Once those costs have been, those bonds have been paid off, we will revisit this as a board to determine moving forward what portion we're going to need in order to continue with capital improvement and maintenance. I think intent stated is being responsible to our constituents. Otherwise, you just leave it open, say we can change it any time. That's too loosey-goosey for me, and I haven't seen government have a reluctancy to say, well, they're used to paying it, well, let's just keep it going. It's just the way it is.
I think this fund in particular, that's one of the reasons we're doing it, is restricted to its uses. So we can't just keep doing it because we feel like it. We need to have this need, defined, and that's what we're doing.
True, I understand.
Yeah.
But while it's restricted in its uses, unlike what was with the YMCA, it's still.
Or the broadband, right?
Pardon?
Or the broadband, or the library.
Yeah, all that, and I could speak to
Or
the
the golf
broadband
course.
issue
Right,
too.
right.
With expectation and how things are sold and what we ended up with. All I'm just saying is the more integrity you can build into what we do, I think it cultivates and builds trust, like we talked earlier, and efforts that we make to do something even though we're in the midst of things. And so that's just my position. But again, I respect the will of the board, so.
Commissioner Sullivan?
I know we've talked about this language paralleling or being statutory in nature. I think this is a compromise. It's reasonable. We obviously are going to go and look back at it. One thing we haven't discussed is bond rates. And looking at the economy right now, bond rates are a little volatile, and from my opinion, it would be better to jump on this sooner rather than later. That may be a much better deal for our taxpayers in our county in the long run. So with that, I would like to make a motion to approve the ordinance as written with the rates and charges for solid waste management services provided by Cook County.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further Comments, questions, discussion?
Yeah, I very much appreciate the suggestions and language, and I'm very open to revisiting. In fact, I think we need to. I just don't want to do it, on the day that we're making this decision, after having state statute standing and having, as I said, our staff look at things as far as that balance is concerned, as well as our attorneys, our specialist attorneys and such. So the communications I've had with the public have been pretty clear and without question. And if there are further questions, I'm happy to answer those in discussions out there too. But pretty excited to get this going, and it's going to be a great project, and we can make language better and understanding better as we go.
Commissioner White?
Based on the fact that our decision here right now will not impact the process going forward. I want to confirm that.
I don't know the answer to that.
I mean, if we have monies that have to be spent, and you have been given a verbal, you can go ahead and start. Was that this one? Yeah. Without the permit, then the hand of the government will not come down or something and really pull the rug out.
You know, I honestly can't, sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
I honestly can't understand. The money question is more a question for Brady. I didn't see a question on the permit asking about the funding. So it's really an unknown for me right now. So.
Did you have comments? Roland?
Just that I think the unknown for us too is what would happen to our timing. It's a question that I think Ellers and Freiberger would be able to answer for us, but haven't at this point. So in my mind, there's a little bit of an unknown, similar to what Dustin's saying about what's the risk associated with pushing it down the timeline. So there's an unknown there from my perspective as well.
If I can say one more thing. My only concern is if it does get delayed, we start running into timing issues for construction. Say we couldn't start until July for some reason after this decision today. Now we're trying to build this facility in the winter, right? Which there's costs associated with that in most cases. And then our project is also timing with the project for the law enforcement center. So the same people, the same contractors that are building the transfer station are also building the law enforcement center. So the plan that Brooke and the folks from Johnson Wilson have worked out is, they're going to have one construction manager, one team. They're going to do concrete at our place. They're going to go to the law enforcement center. They're going to put the walls up at our place. They're going to go put the walls up at the law enforcement center. So my fear is if we do run into a situation in this process that slows things down, not only are we affecting the transfer station facility, we're also affecting the law enforcement. So to answer your question, I guess that would be my one fear.
And it just similar to that, along with the bonding, we've talked about and Brady made reference to this, but about combining the bonds and whether or not they're jail bonds or CIP bonds, and if we can bond both of those projects at the same time. There's benefits to be had there, and kind of to better define the uncertainty that I have about the impact of delaying is just not knowing how delaying would impact that component.
Commissioner Gamble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are a lot of what-ifs, and they're valid what-ifs. It's an unfortunate situation that those that can answer those questions of what-ifs and the assumptions we're making are not here to do that. And I think when it's significant in a project like this, it would probably be better to have people like yourself to be able to answer our questions so that we aren't making assumptions. And because all of the concerns are valid concerns, but they could be simply answered if we had people that could answer those. And we made a decision relative to our basement remodel and applauded the process because it's like we didn't leave any stone unturned. And that's what we want, is that due diligence to be evident in our decision-making as opposed to having to make decisions on what-ifs. So I will support the motion because I'm not intending to slow the process down, but I am encouraging that if we are given something in a document like this that defines our fiscal responsibility on behalf of our constituents, we need to be able to answer those questions and do what we think is best. That's why we're elected to do that. And so I'm just trying to encourage that we build integrity into all of our processes, as we spoke to relative to the building expansion in the basement, the remodel. And so I feel we're moving forward with a lot of what-ifs that are valid. It's just too bad we can't answer those questions so that we have all the pieces in making an informed decision. Thank you.
Would it be possible to postpone this or table this and have a special meeting on this and have Ellers and Freiberger on the line to answer the questions?
We'd have to schedule a public hearing again.
Which requires, what's
Well, first we have to decide what's going to be in the ordinance. So then you'd start discussions. Once you decided what's going to be in the ordinance now, then you would say, at the following meeting, after the decision was made, what is the language, what are the rates, what are the classifications? Once all that was done, then you would have a meeting to say, now we're going to set a public hearing to consider these on whatever that date that is. Given how long discussions might take, getting people together, I mean, I don't know what to guess. It could delay it a month, 2 months, hard to know.
So right now, we have a motion and a second. Are we ready to vote? Okay. The motion and a second to approve the ordinance establishing rates and charges for solid waste management services provided by Cook County. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Rowan?
Madam Chair, I just make sure I understand the intent of the board, that we should reach out to Freiberger and Ellers and talk about understanding what it would imply, what the implications of changing the language would be, and bring that back to the board for
Yes.
future conversation about
Yes.
potentially amending.
And how and when, and et
Rates
cetera.
or
Sure.
language within the ordinance.
Commissioner Gamble?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. The other thing is, if you look at the motion that just passed, the motion that just passed is deceiving. Because we just made a motion to support Cook County supplying solid waste management. That's not what we're doing. In other words, if you read back what the motion is, the motion should at least, we should be consistent, we should clarify that what we're doing is we're supporting this, proposed documentation with the rate being what it is and the intent of building a facility. But we're not providing solid waste management. That's not what we're doing.
Rates and charges.
Rates and charges.
For the county to provide solid waste management, if you read if you read it back, I'm just noting that we're confusing it by, if somebody just wants to look at the minutes and read what it says, we're saying Cook County is going to provide solid waste management. We're not.
I think the language is confusing because you can read words like management in different ways. I think in the statute, because of the language that comes after the word management, that it includes potentially the management you're talking about that North Shore Waste is going to do, but largely it also includes just the management, the overall management, which means providing that someone else does it is considered management also. And I think that's our purpose here, is the overall, making sure it gets done, and we're going to provide a facility to do that. But the word can be read different ways. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be good to clarify.
Yeah. So it takes a lot of clarifying after the fact.
We ready to move on? Moving on, then, we're going to go to commissioner reports and meeting updates. We've all been down, not all.
No.
We've been down to the Capitol. We've had a wonderful experience down there, and so I'm wondering if anyone would like to share anything from our meetings and meeting with the legislators and all the folks who were important in our lives when we were down there. Commissioner Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the things I want to share with the public is that when Commissioner Storley and I got down there on Tuesday evening, one of the first people we saw is our new HRA director, Jeff Brand. And it was a pleasure to see him engaged right away with the work that is done on behalf of the people of Cook County. He was attending the IRRB meeting, which was held at the Intercontinental Hotel where we stayed. And it was on that evening that Hamilton Habitat received $114,000 for their hookup to City of Grand Marais services. And so it was really great to have him there. And so that is one thing outside of speaking with our legislators that I wanted to share with the public.
One of the meetings that I attend and represent us is public health. And we really did not pass any resolutions, or we agreed with several of the items that AMC is promoting. We heard a lot from different committees on public health. And so I came away from there, though, with the last comment of the meeting, when a commissioner stood up and said, you know, we come here, AMC meetings, we go to our public health meetings in our counties, and we talk about public health for everybody else. Public health for us is important too. Our mental health is important, and how we deal with folks in our county, because we're going to be facing some pretty dire decisions based on what's happening in our country. And so this person said, take care of yourselves, because you are serving other people, and that can be stressful on us as representatives from our counties. So we all applauded and thanked that person for that perspective, because it really is important that we take care of ourselves. Maybe Commissioner Mills has some comments about his experience at the legislature, or anything else you want to fill in?
Yeah, one of the big takeaways was just visiting with other administrators and other commissioners and other staff from around the state and region, just about their processes with administrator search and selection as well. Really helps getting a lot of different perspectives there and the different experiences. And then also just touching base with our Representative Scraba, as well as Senator Housechild, on where they're at, what they're seeing, the lay of the land, and they understand what we're saying, and I really appreciate that connection and understanding and reaffirming that. And it's just always refreshing to visit with them. And as frustrating as other news can be from the operations at the state. And then hearing the leaders speak, both the House and Senate majority and minority leaders, I thought that was really interesting and insightful. And I saw, I guess I saw the impact of a presidential run on our governor. He's always very well spoken and off the cuff, and I just noticed. The hardship that he's gone through expressed in his words and just line of thinking. So one of the things I didn't like about the House and Senate leaders was the kind of we need to work together, but it's their fault type of language. It's talking out of both sides of their mouths, and I didn't appreciate that. So I hope the work together side of the mouth comes through more so than it's their fault, but we will see. Kind of off to a rocky start there, but try to stay on the sunny side.
Commissioner Gamble?
I would just comment on the session where we had the panel with the representatives, that we intently listened and to the different things that were said. When they got to the last question that was posed, the question was, what have you done on the positive side, something to that effect. And the two from different opposing parties said, we take walks in the morning and we talk about our lives, we talk about this or that. And the response on each one of those that came across from each of those representatives that each spoke to what's positive, the response from all of those that participated, just, there was a lot of clapping, which is an indication that people want people to work together and have mutual respect and regard. And I thought that's healthy to see, because when we lose that, there's not a lot of hope in getting things done. So that was something that to me made a big impression.
Anything else? So we have upcoming meetings to note. There was just an addition here for the Board of Commissioners special meeting, which is tomorrow. And then also Thursday, and I believe that was it for any additions. And then we also have the Cook County lodging tax comparison through December of '24. We have recognition of staff, March staff anniversaries. Neil Pedersen from the Attorney's Office, 1 year. Connor Ingram from Highway Department, 2 years. Leanne Averly from Public Health and Human Services, 3 years. Todd Ford, Public Info Officer, 3 years. Kim Shepard from Court Administration, 28 years. Courtney Bernier from Auditor's Office, 31 years. Thank you for your continued work and support here. And then we have a March milestone anniversary, Amanda Weberg from Soil and Water, 5 years. And with, yes.
I wasn't just twiddling my thumbs while you guys were down talking to the legislators.
Your tulips come up?
Do inform us.
Well, I was holding down the fort. You have no idea what's going to happen in this county. Just stay tuned. So there was a Healthy Housing Network meeting, and I didn't go to that one, but I do know that the land service offices talking about if you need help or you need anything, we are definitely putting formats in place to facilitate getting information out to needy constituents. The North Shore Management Board, that was, the North Shore Management Board is a state-approved board that is to focus on the shoreline of Lake Superior. We got Lake County, Cook County, St. Louis County, and the reservation. And it has become quite apparent among all of the participating members that there needs to be a revisit of the purpose of this board. Is it management or is it a consulting board? I mean, what is it is ARDC has a facilitator, and then they also have that pulls the meetings together. And then they have a person on their staff that when our land services department approves variances or conditional use permits. That goes to ARDC, to this particular person, who then reviews it and sends it on now to the board and the North Shore Management Board, to their board chair and vice chair for approval. And this is kind of a new thing that's been happening. And the question is, and there's not agreement, is this what the role of this board is, to review every variance and every conditional use permit in all these counties, or do we rubber stamp it, or what is the role? So that is, the emails are flooded coming in the last couple of days like this. We need to have a full conversation about the history, the reason behind it, because there's not a consensus among the board members that this is what we do. So that was fun. And then David was so kind and well-received, I think. Well, I thought well-received. He came to the Council on Aging down at the hub, and they talked about their financial woes and their successes and where they're going. And that was, that's what I thought. I was doing one more thing. But I guess and the other one was, I went to the attended the quarterly SHIP Regional Community Leadership Meeting. And that is it's a collaboration of different groups that, as I sat back and participated some, I don't think they understand really or appreciate the value of what they're doing as a collective. Individually, I don't believe they really understand how important they are in trying to help their communities. And I thought about this long and hard after the meeting, so now I have to wait 2.5 months to tell them this. But it's really heartwarming that there are so many community people across the region that really care about the people that live here. So that's what, then, I also did attend the Firewise meeting, and Commissioner Sullivan wrote me up a little thing that I had to write, that I read. And my keyport was the leading topic in 4 of your paragraphs. However, I found in reading your statement, 1 page, I've read so many books to preschoolers that I had a really hard time not adding emphasis in places to make it a really exciting document. So it was all about the airport, and then I tried to read it as flat and unexciting as I could. So that's what I did while you were all gone.
Always a new experience. Commissioner Sullivan.
Madam Chair, I have a few committees I'd like to just update the board, fellow commissioners in our community about. One of the things for commissioners in particular is I would encourage you to look at the MCIT website. They have been offering a 4-part series on open meeting law, and they've talked about personnel. They've talked about when you're issuing contracts. The next one is about remote participation, but I would really encourage, it's very thorough. Each of the 4 sessions is about an hour in length, but it would be well worth everyone's time to revisit that. I had an opportunity to attend the open house at Gunflint View a couple weeks ago. Yeah. And many people in our community did attend. There were about 40 people altogether. And it was just a real nice opportunity to look at one of the units. It was on the 2nd floor, unit with a view of the lake. But one thing is some community members did not go up the steps. They went to other units that were not available for the open house. And so there was some concern about cords and the mess that was there and whatever, and those were areas that were not open to the public. So I just want to make certain that people understand the unit that was available to be viewed was up on the 2nd floor. Commissioner White.
I would like to add to that I had a constituent who said she would have really liked to have gone, but she could not wasn't certain she could make the steps to get to the second floor, so she
Right.
didn't go at all.
Right. And there will be other open houses coming up as it gets closer to opening and units are finished. Appliances aren't in, cabinets are up, there's, flooring that's been up. That particular unit was sheetrocked and painted and all ready to go. But they're making great progress, as I'm sure many people are seeing as they drive by. Cook County Highway Department, both Commissioner White and I attended recently, and one of the concerns is that a project that was on the docket for next year, the end of the Gunflint Trail, that funding has been frozen. So that project is off the table for now, just so the community knows. I know a lot of people who live at the end of the trail, contractors who work at the end of the trail, are really concerned about that section of road, and so we'll just have to see what happens with the federal funding. Cook County Historical Society, the big news there is they've changed their time of their meeting. It's on Thursdays at 1 o'clock now. So you'll be getting minutes from them, a little bit different time of the day, but the meetings will maintain the same format with a Zoom option as well as in person at the museum. Airport Commission met, and last week the FAA was to look at our draft master plan. We're hoping to get feedback next week on how that meeting went. There will be a public meeting that will be scheduled in May for members of the public to come up to the airport and talk about the airport master plan and to see some big boards of what it looks like and how things are laid out. So I'll make sure to get that information out to the public as soon as that date is selected. Cook County Local Energy Project met, and one of the things for people that are interested in solar is that there's going to be another group buy. We've done this annually for about the last 8 years, and so the group buy will be through Solar United, which operates out of Duluth, and that bid and communication with the public and applications will be available March 12th. We had a builders workshop through CCLEP, which was held in cooperation with Cook County Higher Education. 14 people attended, got recertified, and got some of their needed continuing ed credits in the building area. And then related to what Commissioner White mentioned, the Healthy Housing and Envelope meeting, we have 3 individuals who are waiting for windows to be installed. We still need someone to come forward and help us install windows. They're all paid for, the projects are approved, but we just need someone to do that work. So that's a pitch for people out in the public. Brady, if you're free and you have the skill,
Oh, I don't have the skill.
And then the Gunflint Trail Scenic Byway Committee met, talked a little bit about the impact of the federal freeze on the Gunflint Trail Highway project and its funding. Also to note that we usually have several people from the U.S. Forest Service in attendance at that meeting. There were no people in attendance at that meeting, and we don't know what that means. We do know that someone retired. We've heard different things. I don't want to spread any rumors, but just that there were no members of the U.S. Forest Service that were there. And also noticed, and it was noted at our Soil and Water Conservation District meeting that, there's proposed state cuts to AIS at 50%, Soil and Water Conservation District changes in 2026 budget, but that the USDA has laid off some of their people, which is going to impact some of the work that's done, and some of the foresters are laid off that work with contractors that also work with our SWCD. So we're starting to feel the impacts. But I will end on a positive note. Take a Kid Fishing is Saturday, July 19th. So put that on your calendar.
And this evening, all across Minnesota, townships are meeting for their annual meeting where we discuss budget, and then the budgets are set in August. So this is my marathon night. The meetings don't start till 8:05. So I look at everybody's agenda, and then I have to kind of figure out who gets a little bit of my time. otherwise. Commissioner Gamble?
Yeah, thank you. I just was going to make a request that with our list of assignments as commissioners, it's good to have that list, the way it's been broken out. One other additional thing that I think would be beneficial is that if it's noted whether we are there to listen, whether we are there to advise, or whether we are there with voting authority, it should be noted so that we understand that. That would be helpful. And what Jen has done in that regard is first making that a lot easier. That's great, but that's another element that would be great to know going in so that we're aware of that.
So are you asking because you're not sure about the commissions and boards you're on, whether you're a voting member or not?
That's right. In other words, when we have assignments or we get reassigned or whatever, and we say when these meet and we should notify, so that they know that we're now taking that place. But we should also know the capacity in which we are there. Whether we are there as a voting member, we're there as an advisor, and we're there as somebody to listen.
You want that posted?
It should be on that list. I think
So
you
you
can
know.
just.
So Commissioner Sullivan, you worked on that
So,
list.
absolutely, so many of the groups have the bylaws
Yeah.
in there, and if you click on that, it will state that information.
So it's
One-
on the thing with the website?
Yes,
then,
it's
that
on our
go in there and
website,
look at. All right.
correct. There are some that are missing, and all of us as commissioners need to go to those organizations and have them forward their bylaws, because that's the difficult thing to get.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, whatever we do in that, but I think it just makes it more complete.
It's better for the five of us to try to seek out that information than Jana
Yeah.
to seek out all of that.
Yeah, I would agree, but we could forward it so that it could be keyed.
Right.
Any further business? Commissioner Mills?
Yeah, I just wanted to report on a meeting I had yesterday. I was invited to learn about the NOAA, which is, the Weather National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, Northland Resilience Collaborative. So this is they're still forming, I guess, but I can just read the little blurb here. It says the grant totaling $1.85 million over 4 years is awarded by NOAA to St. Louis County, with ARDC serving as sub-awardee. The project covers the counties of St. Louis, Carlton, Cook, and Lake, as well as the Bois Forte, Fond du Lac, and Grand Portage reservations. Its primary purpose is strengthen resilience against climate change and coastal hazards in the region. The project aims to strengthen regional resilience by fostering collaboration among local communities and tribal nations and integrating indigenous knowledge into climate resilience planning. It focuses on building community capacity by equipping communities with the knowledge and tools necessary for climate adaptation. A key component is the development of a comprehensive regional resilience plan, which prioritizes climate adaptation strategies and outlines pathways for implementation. Additionally, the project will offer ongoing technical support, resources, workshops, and training to further empower communities. And so this is something that James was involved with before he left, and so they're asking us, okay, where's Cook County? They understand James is gone and we have interim administrator, but just how could we best be represented there? And so I thought I would bring it to the board here. I said I'd be happy to fill in or do virtual meetings. They want to have meetings travel around, but it's going to be a lot of travel, and I said practically virtual is going to be best for us, probably no matter what. I know Extension is involved in this, so I know Commissioner Sterling, Commissioner Gamble might have interest. I know Commissioner Sullivan's work in CCLEP, you could have interest there. Some of the projects that I'm interested in involve composting and biochar, and so that fits into there too. So I think we all have elements, and North Shore Management, we all have elements that could fit within that. The expectations for the group is contribute to bi-monthly meetings, be in working groups to complete collaborative objectives, attend desired trainings, update collaborative of resilience progress for sharing in newsletter and reporting, share about this work, use technical assistance offered, and integrate this work into your own. So that was the catch that I was asking them about too.
Do we have a date for the meeting when it regularly occurs?
Tomorrow, as a matter of fact. So I informed them that we wouldn't be there tomorrow. I was going to try to find an employee that was not a department head that would not be tied up necessarily tomorrow. And I thought potentially Neva Maxwell. I don't know if she'll be involved in deliberations or not, but that was someone who came to mind. So, but I haven't spoken with her yet. I don't know if you.
I would think anybody from Land Services or Soil and Water might be appropriate.
I think we could go reach out to Tim and Elena and see what their recommendation is.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Thank you for bringing that up. We'll discuss that next week at ARDC. And this is a result of hiring a young lady to come to ARDC to work on climate. And so this is a result of, she's on it.
And so there was in this meeting, I was a little, I wouldn't say overwhelmed, I was surprised at the number of participants just to kind of communicate with me. But yeah, Deanna was there from ARDC. She's the climate resilience planner. And then Carola, I forget her last name, maybe it's here. Dalen, from St. Louis County. That's the St. Louis County Facilities and Sustainability Director. And then another gentleman that I think is out of the U extension, but is half of the funding for his position is coming from this NOAA grant. And Seth, I don't recall his last name, but it was just some pretty big hitters that were kind of on their game and looking to make this work. So felt great to have additional resources out there, and they're really kind of fishing for different issues that I saw that in regard to sustainability and resiliency and climate change for Cook County that would impact community members. And yeah, I'm sure their ears are always open if we have other ideas or issues that we want to share with them. So.
It's the beginning.
Right, yep. They said it was the formation. And, yeah. So bi-monthly, I don't know if it's always going to be Wednesdays, middle of the month or what the deal is there.
We could discuss that at the meeting too.
Probably, yep.
Yep. Pick a time. It's going to be good for some, not for others, so, yeah. Okay, any other business? Otherwise, there'll be a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for all the good discussions and, topics and everything. Adriana got it all.
Thanks for letting us talk.
Since you're not able to go to ARDC,
Okay.
would you be interested in looking at the area that I started off with? I don't do it anymore. That's transportation.
Yeah, well, I go to that northern
This is from